At 85 years old, the famous singer and actress Toni Tennille is finally ready to open up her heart and share the truth she kept hidden and secret for such a long time from everyone around her. She was the shining, bright half of the super-popular singing duo called Captain and Tennille. They sang the song you probably know, "Love Will Keep Us Together," which became a huge hit that everyone loved and remembered. But behind all the music and performances, and behind that big, bright smile that made millions of people fall in love with her, Toni was quietly going through a life that was full of emotional struggles, hard times, and painful feelings that she never told anyone about. Her marriages, which everyone thought looked like perfect, beautiful fairy tales from the outside, were actually hiding secrets of feeling lonely, having her heart broken, and making really difficult choices that she never shared with a single person. Now, after keeping quiet for so many decades and years, Toni Tennille is finally breaking free and letting go of the past. She's revealing and sharing the deeply personal truth about the love stories that shaped her life and defined who she became, and the important lessons she learned along the way through all her experiences. Before we begin this story, if you are a fan of Toni Tennille and love her music, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you can see more stories like this one. Catherine Antoinette Toni Tennille's story started and began on May 8, 1940, in a city called Montgomery, Alabama. This was a place where music and big dreams quietly wove their way through her family's everyday, normal life. She was the oldest of 4 sisters, which means she was the first child born in her family. She grew up under the watchful, caring eyes of parents who were both dreamers in their own special right and had their own talents. Her father, whose name was Frank Tennille, ran and operated a furniture store during the day to make money. But he once sang and performed with a famous band called Bob Crosby's Bobcats, which kept a touch of show business charm and excitement alive in their household and home. Her mother, who was also named Catherine just like Toni's middle name, brought her own special spark of creativity and talent to the family. She hosted a daily television program in Montgomery, which was a rare and unusual feat for women to do in that era and time, period. Toni's early childhood years were filled with the rhythm and beat of Southern life and the melody and music of possibility and hope for the future. After she graduated and finished from Sidney Lanier High School, she went to attend Auburn University, where she spent her time immersing herself and diving deep into classical piano music. She also performed and played with the spirited and energetic Auburn Knights Big Band, which was full of life and fun. But just as her world and life seemed steady and stable, fate and destiny took an unexpected turn that nobody saw coming. When her father's business collapsed and fell apart in 1959, the whole family had to leave behind their familiar Alabama roots, their home, and everything they knew. They started a brand new life in Balboa, California, on the other side of the country. There in California, Toni had to trade in her piano keys for regular office work to help make money. She took jobs working as a file clerk, organizing papers, and later as a statistical analyst, working with numbers and data. She was quietly carrying her musical dreams with her into a new and uncertain chapter of her life, not knowing what would happen next. Long before Toni Tennille became a household name that everyone knew as one half of the famous duo Captain and Tennille, she experienced and went through a quieter, lesser-known chapter and time period of her personal life. This was her first marriage that most people don't know about. In the early 1960s, while she was still navigating and trying to figure out the uncertain waters of a budding and growing musical career, she got married to a man named Kenneth Shearer. This was before she became famous. At that time, Toni was immersed and deeply involved in the behind-the-scenes world of music and theater, working hard and honing her craft, which means practicing and perfecting her skills. This was long before fame would find her, and she would become a star. Their union and marriage was understated and quiet, almost invisible and hidden against the backdrop of her growing ambitions and dreams of becoming successful. And their marriage lasted less than a decade, which means it was shorter than 10 years. It ended in divorce in 1972, just 3 years before Toni would achieve and reach her breakout success and become really famous. In interviews with reporters and in her memoir book that she wrote, she rarely spoke about or mentioned Shearer, and when she did talk about him, her tone and the way she spoke carried neither bitterness nor regret or anger. It was only quiet acknowledgement, simply recognizing what had happened. There were no dramatic betrayals where someone did something really wrong, and no heated, angry memories that upset her. There was just the simple recognition and understanding that the marriage had not fulfilled or satisfied the needs of her heart, or helped her creativity grow. It lacked, and didn't have the deep, harmonious connection and special bond she would later cultivate and build with Daryl Dragon. And it didn't provide or give her the personal growth she craved and deeply wanted as a young woman who was finding her voice and figuring out who she was. In hindsight, which means looking back at it now, that first marriage reads and seems less like a failure or mistake and more like a stepping stone. It was a formative experience, which means an important learning experience that quietly shaped Toni's journey and helped make her who she became. It marked the end of a chapter in her life that never truly ignited or caught fire with passion. Yet, it set the stage and prepared the way for the next chapter, the one in which her talents, ambitions, and desires would align and come together in a way that eventually transformed her into the iconic figure, the legendary person that the world would come to know and love. It was a subtle, bittersweet prelude, like an introduction to the life and love story that lay ahead and was waiting for her in the future. Toni Tennille's rise to fame and becoming a star was a mixture of serendipity, which means lucky coincidence, and real talent. It all started with her work on a rock musical in Los Angeles, which was a project that unexpectedly changed the entire course of her life in ways she never imagined. It was there at that musical that she met Daryl Dragon, who was a gifted and talented keyboardist with a storied past, meaning he had an interesting history of playing alongside the famous Beach Boys band. Dragon recognized and saw something beyond just Tennille's musicianship and ability to play music. He saw a voice that could carry the spotlight and be the star of the show. Together, they formed and created the duo called Captain and Tennille, crafting and making a sound, a special type of music that would come to define what 1970s soft rock music was all about. In 1975, their single song called Love Will Keep Us Together skyrocketed and shot up to #1 on the charts. It earned them a Grammy Award, which is a really important music prize, and secured a special place in the hearts of the American public and all the people who loved music. Their subsequent television variety show, which came after their hit song, amplified and made their charm even bigger. It presented and showed them as the perfect embodiment, the perfect example of love and harmony working together beautifully. Yet beneath and under the glittering exterior, the shiny surface that everyone saw, Toni later revealed and shared that life was far more complicated and difficult than it looked. In her 2016 memoir, the book she wrote about her life, she reflected and thought back on the carefully curated image, the picture they created on purpose. She said, "People saw us as this happy, loving couple, and I went along with it because that was the act, the performance we put on." Behind closed doors, away from the public eye, the relationship with Dragon was marked and characterized by quiet tension, which means uncomfortable feelings. There was emotional distance, like a gap between them, and a sense of isolation, feeling alone, that she carried silently for years without telling anyone. Despite the dissonance, which means the clash and conflict between how things looked and how they felt, Tennille continued to perform. Her public persona, the version of herself she showed the world, was radiating joy and happiness, while her private life simmered and bubbled with unmet needs and unspoken truths that nobody knew about. To the world and all the people watching, she was the effervescent, bubbly, radiant partner in a musical love story that seemed perfect. In reality, though, her journey was tinged and colored with the melancholy of compromise. That means the sadness of having to give up things, making sacrifices, and paying the hidden cost of fame that nobody talks about. Her story remains a haunting reminder, a powerful lesson that the smiles audiences see on performers' faces often mask and hide untold struggles that are happening behind the scenes. It's a blend and mixture of nostalgia, which means fond memories, triumph and success, and quiet sorrow and sadness. Toni Tennille and Daryl Dragon's story began as a meeting of minds and talents coming together, a partnership rooted and based in mutual admiration, which means they both respected each other, and a shared musical vision of what they wanted to create together. Toni was drawn to and attracted by Daryl's extraordinary skill and amazing ability as a keyboardist and arranger, someone who puts music together. And there was an undeniable spark, a special feeling during their early collaborations and times working together. Dragon's quiet, introspective presence, which means he was thoughtful and kept to himself, gave him an air of mystery. He seemed mysterious and interesting, which was something that Toni found both intriguing and magnetic, pulling her toward him. As their professional bond deepened and got stronger, it blossomed and grew into romance, which means they fell in love. This culminated, which means it reached its highest point, in their marriage in 1975. That was the very same year that "Love Will Keep Us Together" became a cultural phenomenon, something that everybody knew about and loved. For decades, which means many, many years, they were inseparable on stage and off. They stayed together and were celebrated and honored as one of music's most beloved couples that everyone adored. Yet behind the public facade of harmony and joy, which means the face they showed the world, their private lives were far more complicated and difficult than anyone knew. Daryl was intensely private, which means he really liked to keep to himself. He was withdrawn and emotionally distant, which means he pulled away and didn't share his feelings. Toni often described him as a good man, a kind person, but also a troubled man, someone dealing with problems whose controlling tendencies, his need to control things, quietly shaped and influenced the rhythm and pattern of their life together. He managed their finances entirely by himself, which means he handled all the money. He seldom, which means rarely, included Toni in decisions about what to do, and he avoided confrontations or emotional discussions where they would talk about their feelings. As she later wrote in her book, he just couldn't share his emotions, which means he couldn't open up and tell her how he felt inside. The contrast, which means the difference between their professional success and personal reality, was stark and huge. Toni increasingly, which means more and more over time, found herself in the role of caretaker, taking care of things. She was managing daily affairs, handling everyday stuff, making decisions alone by herself, and navigating, which means trying to figure out, a marriage in which affection, love and warmth and communication, talking to each other, were scarce and hard to find. Even as they sang songs of love and connection to millions of people all around the world, Toni carried a growing weight, a heavy burden of isolation, feeling alone and responsibility, having to take care of everything. She was convincing herself for years and years that supporting him was her duty, what she was supposed to do. Over time, as years passed, the facade of their perfect partnership, the image they showed everyone, became impossible to maintain and keep up. The emotional cost of silence, not talking and compromise, giving up what she needed, weighed heavily and felt really hard to carry. Their story, which was celebrated and praised on television screens and record albums for everyone to see, belied, which means it hid, the quiet struggles, sacrifices, and loneliness that marked and defined the heart of their life together. It's a haunting reminder, a powerful lesson that appearances, how things look, often mask and hide the complexities, the complicated parts, and sorrow, the sadness behind even the most dazzling success and shiny achievements. Toni Tennille remained and stayed by Daryl Dragon's side for nearly 40 years, which is almost their entire adult lives together. Yet the one thing she craved most, wanted more than anything in their marriage, was emotional intimacy, which means feeling close and connected. But that was always just out of reach, like something she could never quite touch or have. Over time, as years went by, the quiet between them deepened into a chasm, which means it became like a huge gap or canyon. She longed for and really wanted warmth, kindness, conversation, and the simple reassurance of being seen, of having him notice and understand her. But what she encountered instead, what she actually got, was distance, a space between them that kept growing. As she reflected and looked back, she said, "I kept trying to make the relationship better, doing everything she could. Yet the painful truth became impossible to ignore or look away from. Daryl could not or would not meet her halfway, meaning he couldn't or wouldn't try to connect with her. They shared a home and a bed, living together in the same place. But Toni often felt profoundly alone, deeply and completely lonely. She felt like a presence invisible, like she couldn't be seen, to the person closest to her, the one who should have understood her best. In her memoir, her book about her life, she captured and expressed the heartache with stark honesty, telling the truth in a clear, painful way. She wrote, "I was lying next to a man who would not or could not return my love, give back the love she was giving him." Those words crystallize, which means they perfectly capture the essence, the main truth, of her sorrow and sadness. It was a life shared with someone whose emotional doors remained firmly closed, locked shut, never opening to let her in. Daryl was not cruel or mean, and their marriage was far from abusive, where someone hurts another person. Yet his withdrawal, his pulling away, left Toni navigating and trying to figure out a relationship defined by silence, not talking, and unmet needs, things she needed but never got. She stayed year after year, continuing to be there, hoping for even the smallest change, the tiniest bit of improvement. She was clinging to, holding tight to, the hope that connection might blossom and finally grow between them. But the hope faded slowly, getting weaker and weaker over time, leaving only the quiet weight of longing, of wanting something she couldn't have. By 2014, after decades of compromise, giving up what she needed, and quiet endurance, putting up with things, Toni made the painful yet necessary decision, the hard but needed choice, to file for divorce, to legally end the marriage. She later reflected and looked back, saying, "I knew I had to leave, not to hurt him, not because she wanted to cause him pain, but to save myself, to protect her own well-being and happiness." Her story is a testament to, which means it shows and proves, the delicate balance, the careful middle ground between devotion, being loyal and dedicated, and self-preservation, taking care of yourself. It's a poignant reminder, a touching and sad lesson, that even lifelong love, love that lasts your whole life, cannot flourish and grow without being truly seen, without someone really understanding and noticing you. Toni Tennille's choice to leave Daryl Dragon was never came from anger or resentment being upset at him. Even after their divorce was finalized and officially ended in 2014, her care and concern for him endured and continued. As Dragon's health began to decline, to get worse due to a neurological disorder, a disease affecting the brain and nerves, later diagnosed and identified as Parkinson's disease, Toni quietly stepped in, coming to help. She was ensuring he had support and comfort, making sure he was taken care of and felt okay. She relocated him, moved him close to her home in Prescott, Arizona. She visited him frequently, coming to see him often and oversaw, which means she supervised and took care of, aspects of his care and the help he needed. She reflected and said, "I wasn't going to abandon him, leave him alone. I just couldn't stay married to him anymore." She couldn't continue being his wife. Their continued closeness after divorce, after legally ending their marriage, puzzled many people and confused a lot of folks, including Dragon himself. He was confused too. Despite her repeated explanations, even though she explained it over and over, he struggled to grasp and understand why their marriage had ended. This was a confusion that had shadowed and followed their relationship for decades, for many, many years. Toni had spent years offering and giving love, support, and companionship, being a friend and partner, only to encounter emotional distance, a gap between them. And that very silence, that not talking had been a core part, a main piece, of their struggle and difficulties. Yet, when Dragon needed her, when he needed help, she was there. She was a quiet anchor in his final years, something steady and reliable during the last part of his life. In 2019, Toni was at his side as he passed, as he died, holding his hand in those last moments when he took his final breaths. Her grief was profound. Her sadness was deep and strong, but so was her understanding. She understood the situation clearly. She had loved him deeply, with her whole heart, but leaving, ending the marriage, had been an act of survival, something she had to do to keep going, as much as liberation, which means freedom and breaking free. The divorce had not severed, it hadn't cut, the bond they shared, the connection between them. It had reshaped it, changed its form, allowing her to continue caring for him, still helping and being there, while reclaiming her own life, taking back control of her own happiness and future. In that delicate balance, that careful middle ground of love and self-preservation, loving someone and taking care of yourself, Toni Tennille's story reflects and shows the bittersweet complexity, the mix of sad and sweet feelings, of devotion, being loyal, loss, losing someone, and the quiet strength it takes to honor both another person and oneself, to respect someone else and also respect yourself. For decades, for many, many years, Toni Tennille kept her struggles hidden and secret behind the radiant smile, the bright, glowing smile that fans associated with her, that people connected with her soft rock hits, and the television variety show she shared with Daryl Dragon. Yet in 2016, she broke that silence, stopped being quiet, with the release of her memoir, her book about her life, called Toni Tennille. She was finally lifting the veil, pulling back the curtain, on the private life that had remained largely unseen, mostly hidden, from everyone. Writing the book was never an act of revenge, never about getting back at someone, or a bid for scandal trying to create shocking gossip. It was a way to reckon with, to face and deal with, her own story and offer clarity, to give clear explanations, to those who had admired her from afar, from far away. Toni explained her motivation plainly, simply telling why she did it. She said, "I wanted people to understand that you can love someone and still leave them, that loving someone doesn't mean you have to stay if it's hurting you." The memoir traced and followed years of quiet, sorrow and sadness and emotional neglect, not getting the emotional care she needed. It revealed and showed the hidden costs, the prices she paid, of a marriage that had appeared idyllic, that looked perfect and ideal. To the outside world and everyone watching, she wrote with neither anger nor self-pity, not feeling sorry for herself. Instead, she wrote with a reflective, clear-eyed honesty, looking back thoughtfully and telling the truth clearly. This is the kind of honesty that only comes from carrying the weight of silence, keeping secrets for too long, for way too many years. Through its pages, throughout the book, readers glimpse, they get to see the tension, the uncomfortable conflict between public perception, what people thought, and private reality, what was actually happening. They also see the courage it takes to claim one's own life and happiness, to take back control of your own life, even when love endures and continues to exist. Toni's memoir stands as a thoughtful testament to, it shows and proves, resilience, being strong and bouncing back. It's a poignant reminder, a touching lesson, that love and self-preservation, loving someone and taking care of yourself, can coexist, can exist together at the same time, even when the world cannot see it or understand it. Toni Tennille's legacy, what she left behind and how she'll be remembered, is defined not just by her decades-long career in music, her many years of making music, but by the enduring charm and warmth, the lasting loveliness and kindness she brought to every stage, every studio where she recorded, and every living room across America where families watched her. Even after the peak of Captain and Tennille's fame, after the highest point of their success in the 1970s and 1980s, Toni continued to nurture, to take care of and grow her love for music. She kept performing solo by herself, recording new songs, and delighting audiences with her unmistakable voice, the voice that nobody could confuse with anyone else's. While the duo's "Love Will Keep Us Together" remains their signature #1 hit, their most famous and important song, Toni's voice, also shone. It also sparkled and stood out in other chart toppers. Other songs that went to the top of the charts, like "Do That to Me One More Time," "Muskrat Love," and "Shop Around." Each song was cementing, which means making permanent and strong, the duo's place in pop culture, in popular entertainment, and defining the soft rock era, that time period, with its light, melodic sweetness, gentle and pretty music. Their variety show in the late 1970s, their TV show in the later part of that decade, further expanded their influence, made their impact even bigger, turning Toni into a household name, a name everyone knew, and a symbol of approachable, relatable stardom, being a star that regular people could understand and connect with. Beyond the duo, outside of Captain and Tennille, Toni's solo ventures and collaborations, her projects by herself and with other people, showcased, which means they displayed and showed off, her classical training and versatility, her ability to do many different things well. She recorded jazz standards, classic jazz songs, Broadway tunes, songs from musicals, and Christmas albums, holiday music. She was always highlighting, showing off her skillful phrasing, the way she sang words beautifully, and rich tone, the full, beautiful sound of her voice, her ability to balance, to keep a good mix of technical precision, being exact and perfect, with emotional warmth, feelings and kindness, allowed her to sustain a career that spanned decades, lasted for many years. She was appealing to audiences across generations, to people of all different ages who loved her music. In her later years, as she got older, Toni has lived a quieter, reflective life, a calmer life thinking about the past, in Prescott, Arizona. She's been embracing, taking on, and accepting the role of mentor and advocate, someone who guides and speaks up for others, while occasionally performing for dedicated fans, the people who really love her music. She has remained candid, stayed honest and open about her personal struggles, her difficulties and challenges, particularly in her memoir and interviews with reporters. She's earning admiration, getting respect and love, not only for her artistry, her talent and art, but for her honesty, resilience, being strong and bouncing back, and grace, being elegant and kind in difficult situations. Her story is one of triumph and endurance, success and lasting through hard times. It's a reminder, a lesson, that success is not measured solely by chart positions, only by how high songs go on the music charts, but by the joy and connection an artist creates, the happiness and bond they make with their fans. Today, right now, Toni Tennille is celebrated as an icon of classic American pop, honored as a legendary figure of traditional American popular music. She's a voice that continues to resonate, that still echoes and touches people's hearts. And she's a figure whose legacy, what she left behind, is defined by both her unforgettable hits, the songs nobody can forget, and her steadfast authenticity, her constant realness and truth in being herself.